so this is our last session. We have opinions.
I was confused.
I was confused, but I liked liked is a strange word. I was okay with the ending of Navy's story. With him being rescued, I guess, by true love and you know, coming out of the non-existent tunnels, and even though he lost a hand and a leg and an eye, or lots of pieces of him were gone, but he still survived, and he and Karen.
They kind of wrapped that up in a neat little.
Yeah, except that then she got breast cancer, and I'm thinking, why did we need to add that? You know, but other than that, I thought it was an okay ending to that part of the story. Johnny's story, on the other hand, was just baffling.
It's like there was some time travel or time folded, you know, with Johnny. Because when he traveled to Virginia, he supposedly put all his notes and manuscript and everything in storage. And it's when he's driving back from Virginia, as I understood it, that he met that band that had a copy of the published book with his name in it, you know. So how did that happen? He didn't stay there that long.
Yeah,
did he?
And as long as it takes to publish a book.
And how would it be taking it out of his storage and publishing it anyway? So, and it sounded like when he met those people, that book had been making the rounds because they would meet people who heard that song and had read it. So there was just it's like, how did that? And Navidson was reading it while he was lost in there. That's the book that he was reading, was the book about his video.
Yeah, I kind of took that one. That was an element I kind of took with a grain of salt. Like, I don't know if maybe it was another book called The House of Leaves, or if Johnny just tossed that in there just to overcomplicate.
Thought it sounded good. Yeah. I don't know, the story about the baby with the holes in his brain just really bewildered me.
But didn't he actually just make all that up?
Well, yeah, but what did it have to do with anything?
If I'm looking at it and just kind of taking it at face value, where it's just the passages where Johnny says, okay, no, of course this didn't happen, but everything else was pretty reflective of something that was going on in somebody's life. I don't think the book really came together very well at the end.
It didn't seem, I kept waiting for Johnny's story and Navy's story to somehow come together, and it never did. I mean, like I say, I felt like he wrapped up Navy's story pretty well. But Johnny's story just was all over the place. I couldn't figure out whether Johnny was dying, whether he, you know, all this business about the imaginary friends that were doctors that didn't really exist, but they're the ones that told him the story about the baby with the holes in his brain.
I didn't. That didn't seem to tie in with anything else.
But that was so involved and so evocative that I felt like it meant something. I mean, it wasn't just another one of Johnny's stories about who got laid last Saturday night or what kind of drugs they took. I mean, this really seemed to have some significance, but I couldn't figure out what it was.
I almost felt like it was Johnny rewriting his own history and sort of fantasizing about what just died in infancy.
I agree with that.
Thought on it.
That's interesting.
What about you, Strand? What were your feelings when you got to the end of the book?
So I was definitely frustrated by the end of it. What helped me though, I was looking at other reviews on YouTube actually just today, and there was someone who was talking about how the book is about the journey itself. It's not necessarily about even the stories so much as it is about your experience in navigating through the book. It's like, again, going back to what we were talking about weeks ago, about it's kind of like a choose your own adventure thing. So we read it the way we felt we were supposed to read it. Now is the chance to go back and do it again if you wanted to invest that time again, but to choose specifically how you want to approach it. So you could read it next time and just focus on Johnny's story and all of his footnotes and everything, or you could ignore Johnny's story, just read the Navidson story. And I think if you do that and choose to concentrate on one specific story, maybe by the end of it you'll have a different conclusion. And so that's what that kind of, it makes it okay for me that it was not the conclusion I was hoping for.
Did you feel comfortable with the way it ended?
Kind of, sort of. It was I mean, I guess I was satisfied by the end. It was nothing wonderful. It wasn't terrible. I didn't think. It was just okay.
Did anybody may feel like Johnny was dying as he was writing this?
In a way, yeah.
In the end, either physically dying or his brain was just totally gone and he was going to be like his mother, institutionalized for life. That he had just used up all of the brain cells, you know. And there again, going back to the baby with the hole in the brains, I felt like he was almost saying that this was about himself.
Mm.
And the fact that the mother decided when the baby would die. You know, science was going to make that decision. They were going to unplug him and take away the ventilator and everything and let him die. But all she had to do was tell him that it was okay to die, and he died. Mm-hmm. So maybe it had something to do with his relationship. You know, his relationship with his mother was very basic to his whole story, I thought. And maybe that, you know, he felt like his mother was telling him it was okay now for him to die.
Yeah. I was trying to remember his mother's letters. You know, they became increasingly incoherent. Yeah. But then there was this point before she died when they started to make sense again, like maybe they'd taken her off some drugs or given her drugs again that, you know, made her thinking more clear. And then she, you know, killed herself. So, I mean, she hanged herself with sheets or something. Was that the thing?
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah, I don't know if it was specified as which. I don't think anybody got like a definitive conclusion.
Oh, okay, but they said she killed herself. So, but one thing I did do, I'll get back to it after I finish the book. You know, one of her letters, she told them from now on, my letters are going to be in code and take the first letter of each word. Well, I went through her next letters and did that. And basically, it was just her telling him about the people coming in and raping her. that was, which had already kind of, you know,
Yeah.
we already knew that. And that was really all it was. I thought maybe there was gonna be some other kind of insight to Johnny
Revelation.
in some of that, you know, but that was really basically all it was. And I sat down and was writing it, and I felt like the kid in that Christmas movie with the Ovaltine thing, decoding, you know, but, anyway.
Well, we had the question from, that I mentioned, 2 months ago where, Danielewski had said he imagined it as a 3-act structure about he said a blind old man, the young man, and the extraordinarily gifted woman. Hey! Walking straight into the labyrinth.
Okay, so, yeah, Sean, say that again,
Okay.
the, the blind man, the young boy, and who?
Okay, asked to briefly describe House of Leaves, Danielewski has said in an interview he likes to look at House of Leaves as a 3-character play: a blind old man, obviously Zampania, a young man, presumably Johnny Truant, and I just lost my place. And a very special, extraordinarily gifted woman. Who is the extraordinarily gifted woman in the novel? What are her gifts? Is her role truly essential as the obviously integral roles played by the blind old man, the young man? Obviously not, because we're not really clear who she is. We're talking about it.
Maybe it was Johnny's mother.
Oh, no,
I feel like it was Karen.
Karen. But I don't see that she was a central character as much as Navy was.
But she was the heroine of the story. She saved him.
Actually, she's the one that actually ended up rescuing him, I guess.
And she's also the one that put those videos together, which I didn't think, you know, I kind of thought, you know, I just maybe thought all through the book she wasn't, you know, that, you know, I mean, I shouldn't have assumed that she wasn't intelligent, but, you know, she'd been.
We didn't get to know her until.
Yeah, you didn't know anything about her as far as how.
Well, and she did such stupid things. I mean, you know, when she wouldn't take her children out of that house when all these awful, horrible things were happening, and she just kind of sat there with her kids in danger, and you know, fussing because nobody would close the door. I mean, you know, she didn't come across as being very intelligent. I thought of her as pretty shallow, actually.
I kind of did too.
Until the very end, when she was the one who was so determined that she brought him out of there.
I kind of feel like I would have enjoyed the book as a whole more if she had been more of a POV character.
Yeah.
And we got inside her head, why don't I take my kids out of here? Or why will I go up to the edge of this doorway?
Yeah.
We just read your lifeline.
He's raising his hand.
Do what?
We just read your lifeline on your palm.
Sorry, yeah, I have my phone resting on the back of my couch. So there we go.
Are you familiar at all with this book?
No, that's why I came.
Here, feel free to just flip through it. just kind of go through the pages.
Because Stratton was saying something about watching some online YouTube, you know, videos about the book or reviews of the book. And I did that too. And on one of them, it said that it was, you know, called it a love story. And I guess, you know, if you want to look at it that way, you could, but I didn't think that was a huge part of it.
Like this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I did. I saw it as a love story.
I mean, it turned out that way in the end. She cared enough about him to go back there and you know, try to get him out. And
yeah, but even when she was being crazy, when she was, you know, it wasn't so much that she was refusing to leave. It wasn't like he was refusing to leave because, oh God, I'm gonna find out what's going on here. She just couldn't seem to get her act together enough to leave. But even at that time, I felt like she was devoted to him, that he was the reason that she was staying. Even when she left, but then she left her children and came back. When she came back in the house and all the crazy stuff was gone and it was just a house, she still wouldn't leave because she felt like that's where he was. Somehow, even if it was, his essence, his spirit, his ghost, or whatever. I think she felt like he was dead, but she still stayed. So yeah, I see it as a love story, and the fact that she did stay and called him out, I guess, was the story of love saving him. It was a strange love story, but it was a love story.
Didn't they say that the light that she shined that presumably led him back was like a bluish light?
Right. He saw it as a star, but it was her flashlight that led him. That's what gave him the direction out.
Now, on our second session of this, I enjoyed reading the bit where Holloway and the team went to try and explore and everything fell apart, and then Navinson went down there and rescued them and everything. When Navinson went in this time, I liked the idea of him riding the bicycle. That was amusing, but I never really
That's kind of clever.
I never engaged with it though, because it's just clear from the get-go. He's got no goal. He's just riding until there's no coming back.
The thing that was weird about it was that he realized that he's going downhill and that he's traveling a great distance. Because he's going downhill and that he couldn't get back on even riding a bicycle. He wasn't gonna probably make it back to him the food, but even when he turned and tried to go a different way, level, it would still go downhill no matter which way it went. So that was because at first when I was reading about him packing up all the stuff that he was taking, I thought, how is he going to carry all that? and then it said the bicycle.
But then he had to leave the bicycle and all of the supplies, and except for the matches and that was a book of matches. That was another thing that I thought was interesting, was how he's at the very end, the matches are all he has left. He's burning the matches for light to read the book, but he's burning a page. He's rolling up the pages and burning them, and each page burns long enough for him to read the next page. And then he gets to the last page of the last match. Exactly. But the thing is, there was also a scene with Johnny where he was in his apartment and the power had been turned off and he was cold and he was burning, matches. Also, just that, how warm are matches? But he was like thinking about burning the manuscript, and it said that he couldn't make himself move the flame close enough to the pages to burn them, and he's thinking it can't be destroyed. But then the book, which was supposedly the same thing, but Lou was the one who kept telling him to burn it. To burn I thought it was interesting, that kind of that type, Yeah, there were so many tie-ins between the two stories, and yet they were totally different stories. Yeah.
Okay, so ultimately, what did we like about the book?
Well, I liked the house.
Yeah,
I liked the whole idea of the house and the
staircase. I love the staircase.
And something about that, but the whole idea of the distances and then the distances changing and the house changing and the idea that it might be, the house might be reflecting the psychology of the people who are in it, you know, their state of mind, because some of the distances that were so long when Holloway's team went in were not that far when Davidson went back in. Yeah. So I like that.
I like the quotes.
Yeah, I like that part.
I liked Navy. I really did
Oh, I didn't
like
say-
him.
Oh, the other thing about the staircase, the three men from Jamestown who had who left the colony, and one of them says, we found his last journal entry that in the journal that was found was, we found a staircase. Well, that was before the house was there.
Yeah.
So they just like found the staircase that went down into the ground, and then they found two bodies, but not the third.
Yeah.
So
So was
Apparently
the
one of
house
those guys-
built at Jamestown? Was that what we were
well, they
supposed
had left
to be?
Jamestown, they were like a little outside of the colony, but yeah, I think it must have been near.
We're in Virginia.
But that was, yeah, so that was kind of interesting, the whole thing about the stairs, but
I just thought Navy was a very, I don't know, tragic hero type, that, you know, he had all this angst about human suffering and documenting it and everything, and yet a human enough to be curious, and I don't know, and he was close to his brother, close to
I liked his brother.
the guy in the wheelchair. What was his name?
Oh, Reston.
Yeah. You know, he was loyal, and I think, and I loved the fact that the last words that were on the tape that he was making just before he was rescued, they was deciding whether he was saying be careful or take care, and they were saying no, he was saying Karen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that I don't know, I really liked him.
There was something Zampano said in his notes about Madison, that in his career as a photojournalist, that he always put something else between himself behind the camera and death, like the little girl and the vulture, devour her. But that he always, in his photos, it was always like something. He didn't have a direct connection, I guess, to whatever the threat was. And that him going back to the house by himself and going into it by himself was the first time that he was the only person in danger.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of interesting.
I
But in a way, Karen did that too,
Yeah.
because she went back and she moved into the house and she didn't bring the kids. She didn't have the kids
But
with her.
she went for him.
Well, she did.
There
Well,
was
she
no
did, but I mean,
question about why she was there. She
exactly.
went
But she was alone in the house.
Yeah.
And so, to me, there was like,
and planted a garden.
I know there were just so many weird things.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I know, like, on the last page of the book, it's about the Yggdrasil, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the tree. Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, it's just like a little free verse poem, which I think that's out of Norse mythology or something. It's a tree that like doesn't quite go down to the ground or something. And that's the final image that Danielewski leads us with.
Well, oh, well,
I didn't.
I guess I missed that. But I don't know, I liked the Navidson story, all these people and the adventures and the, tragedies and rescue and all that. Johnny's story, I have a hard time with that story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just so much drinking and drugging and screwing around, I mean, that's interesting to me.
He was sort of like just lost. I mean, he didn't have any focus or, I mean, I think he was intelligent underneath all that, but, he didn't have any, like, I mean, his life was just
Focus.
chaotic, you know, and
Yeah.
it was, well, and what, I mean, you can imagine that growing up the way that he did, and, you know, he wasn't with his parents, you know, from a fairly young age, and all the foster homes, and, then, you know, going to Alaska and going on the ship.
But
If
did
all
he-
that was true,
But
if
did
it
he
was all
really
true.
do all that stuff?
Oh,
You know,
another thing that was interesting though, in one of the, oh, it's where the pictures were, okay, anyway, it was this one, it's on page 552, but it's like copies of Zampano's notes, and there's a note card, and I can't really, you really read it on here, but there's something I read about this was that, and I guess you can, maybe you can read my contacts a little bit, we won't get not, but, it said he had considered an alternate ending and killing off the kids. So that kind of makes a case for that he made the whole thing up.
now this is Johnny.
No, this was a note card that in Zampano's,
Zampano.
yeah, in Zampano's appendix. And it was out of all his papers and his notes, and it's on this note card, and it's going down. Side effect is going anyway. But it says something like that he thought about an alternate ending and killing off the kids. So that made it sound
That's
like
interesting.
he was,
Zampano made the whole thing.
like
See,
he
I
made,
was
like he
thinking
made the whole,
Johnny made the whole
he made
thing.
the whole thing up.
He
Yeah.
was blind and he's describing a documentary.
But so he couldn't go blind after he saw it.
Yeah, he could have gone blind because he saw it. This always in the back of my mind was that Zampano was blind because of the horror that he had seen and all this stuff, which is where he got this stuff, we don't know, but we know that said stuff made Johnny crazy. So maybe it made Zampano blind.
I think Johnny was on his way.
Well, Johnny didn't have far to go, right?
Crazy town.
But-
Now, I do believe that Johnny's mother loved him.
Oh,
yes.
oh,
All things
Very
considered about
much.
whatever the mental condition.
Yes, definitely,
um,
definitely.
And so I guess that's
Um,
one of the reasons why I kind of lean towards maybe the woman that Danielewski is referring to as the third character was Johnny's mom.
that's kind of how I felt, because I think she was obviously insane, but she was, you know, there was some brilliance there as well.
Well, let's revisit whether she was insane. Okay? We know she was insane by the time we met her.
Yeah,
But if you go back and think of, remember when Johnny was remembering the story, you know, supposedly he had blocked out a lot of stuff, and toward the end of the book, he remembered the episode of the getting burned with the grease, that he pulled the pot of grease off on himself and it burned his hands or arms or however much of it. And that's what made the father take her to the institution.
well, was it actually then, or was it something that happened later? Because it sounded like she was choking him.
I think
And
that
the
was
dad walked
her
in.
version of what
But
happened.
he said,
He
Johnny
remember.
says, I never remember her choking me. But he remembered vividly the episode of the grease, and he remembered his father forcing her out the door and her crying and crying for Johnny.
So
I'm not sure that she was
do
crazy.
you think that the father walked in and saw this had happened and thought she burned him on
Yes.
purpose? And
Yes, and for whatever
But-
reason, had her
but
committed.
there must have been something that had happened before then. Surely he didn't think she just snapped and burned the kid, you know,
There
with
are,
with nothing.
we don't know anything about him.
Right.
And we don't know what his motivations might have been. But I do know that there are historical instances of women who were committed to institutions and made crazy
Mhm.
once they were there. Whether pharmacologically or abusively. We know that she was raped. We know that she was not treated well once she was in this institution. So who knows? Why Johnny seemed to come to the conclusion toward the end that she had not tried to do him harm. That the grease burning episode strictly was an accident.
Mhm.
And that she had never tried to choke him. So maybe she was crazy, maybe she wasn't. I don't think we have any way of knowing that, but I think the argument could be made for the fact that she became crazy after she got to the, whatever that place was.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the name of
Well,
it. The
well,
whale,
so-
Whales too.
yeah.
So does anybody have a conclusion that works for you? Like, maybe not an overriding conclusion that explains everything, but just something like, okay, if I take that, enough pieces fit in place for me.
I think that like maybe somewhere down the road I'll read this again.
Years from now.
But there were just a lot of things that I kept thinking were gonna be, you know, I don't know, I kept trying to tie things in with that maybe one of the people in the original story ended up actually being Zancanio, but I don't think enough time had passed that any of them could have been that old. And then I tried to think about if Will and Karen's son could have been John. You know,
Well, he definitely showed signs of being strange. So
yeah, but
maybe.
But I, you know, and I was kind of looking at the time even because I was thinking about the age that the son was, his name, Chad. The name, the age he was when they moved into the house. And then I was even thinking, you know, when Johnny met that band that had the copy of the book, that maybe one of those guys in the band was actually Chad, you know, because that song was I live at the end of a 5.5 minute hall or
Yeah.
something, and so it like sounded like somebody who lived in the house. And
Well, or somebody who had
him,
read this book.
but he would have been like 17 or 18 by then, and it sounded like this band had already been, you know, so that didn't work out. I just kept trying to make connections that somebody is, you know.
I couldn't find any connections between the two. I felt like I had read two separate books. And that they, other than a few allusions from one to the other, they didn't have anything to do with each other.
And I also wondered after the end, when they moved away, what happened to the house? Did they sell that house?
Yeah, they never said. They said that it was gone.
And wasn't there a part in here where they were saying that, like a real estate agent had said every time somebody bought a house, they only lived there.
Nobody stays there very
Either they never
long.
lived in it at all, or they didn't stay very long.
Nobody
didn't own it very long.
stays very long.
And so just sell it to the next supper and somebody else.
And does everybody who moves there find the tunnels and
Or
the
is
staircase?
it a normal house?
Well, but if that's the case, why does nobody stay very long? Apparently it was a nice house. It was, other than, the creepiness of it.
What about you, Stratton? Any conclusions that worked for you?
Not really. Again, I had to kind of just view it all as fictitious because everything is secondhand information. Like, no, we don't have any solid evidence that any of the Davidson story actually took place, right? So is that all made up? Is Zampano made up? Is this all in Johnny's head? And I couldn't decide, so I stopped trying to figure it out, basically.
Oh, another thing, and I've just been peeking at those I've written, but another thing that was interesting was that when Johnny came back from Virginia in that same chapter where he met that man in the book, he mentioned that he had to sew the buttons back on his coat.
Yeah.
And that he used whole spools of thread so they wouldn't come off again. And so his buttons were falling off, but supposedly he never found the house.
Right.
So why are his buttons falling?
I'm sure somebody online has also suggested maybe he did find the house and it just, those memories were
He didn't
erased
remember
from
it,
it.
he didn't
Yeah.
remember it.
Or maybe the house was a figment of his imagination and so were the buttons falling off, and that's why his buttons were falling off too.
Yeah. And, we were talking about, maybe in the first meeting, about the name of the book. And in Zampano's appendix, the poems, there was one poem that mentioned a house of leaves, but it was like describing, like a house made out of leaves that the wind could just blow it away. Or that it's constantly changing because the wind is moving the leaves around, which is another good, so, yeah.
I guess one thing, Stratton, what you were saying was you were wondering if the whole thing were fictitious. I'm trying to get a handle on the fact that I wanted to believe, now whether this is logical or not, I don't know, but I wanted to believe that there really was a Will Davidson.
Mm.
That he really was a photojournalist. He really did take the picture that won the prize, the little girl who was dying, that he really existed. That maybe all this other stuff was fictitious, that somebody had made up this story about him and had created the mystery of the house and Johnny, and that Johnny maybe had created the mystery of the house. Zampano had created, but I really kind of felt like we were supposed to think that there really was a Davidson. Does that compute with?
In the last chapter of the story, it does show their conclusion and not Johnny's.
Yeah. But whether I don't know, it's kind of hard to even make sense when you talk. Whether all of this story about the crazy house and the brother and the guy in the wheelchair and the split up and the getting back together and her race, whether all of that happened or not, I'm thinking that we really were supposed to think there really was this man who was an actual photojournalist, who took the picture of Lila or whatever her name was.
And the whole thing about the video and in the beginning, it says it was actually released by a movie production company. And, like it sounded like it was shown in theaters or something, on a limited basis or something. If that were the case, why would there be no trace left of it? Why would there be no,
I don't know. I'm fuzzy about how much of the story could have been fictitious, but I want to believe that the guy really did exist, and I don't know why I want to believe
and
that.
I kept wanting it to I needed a little more closure with Tom and Holloway, and even the man who left Jamestown Colony and disappeared, if they were just like lost in there somewhere. Well, I don't think the man from Jamestown could live that long, but at least are they still alive? Could they still be alive in there? I didn't want Tom to die. I didn't like that. So
Yeah, I kept hoping Tom was going to get resurrected. I really.
And so, and yeah, I know, I'm not saying that I was like hoping it was sequel one day, because somebody say that Danielewski said there was not going to be a sequel, but I posted something about this on Facebook about this book, and one of my friends said, well, what did you think about it? And he said, by the way, I think there's a sequel to it. And I said, no, I said, there's a companion, I think. Stratton, did you say the Wells Tow letters?
The Wells Tow letters, yeah.
I ordered that from Amazon.
I just read on
But then I
Wells.
Yeah, but then I read that it is basically the same letters that are in here and then like 11 more. So I don't know if there's anything in those 11. I'll let y'all know.
And if they're written in code, you can decipher them.
Oh, I felt so stupid after I did that. But I was, hoping there's gonna be
Like
something
with the
in there.
decoder ring out of the cereal box.
And the funny thing was, I was going through there and I was like writing down the letters, and it looked like a ransom note or something. But
This is what this book is doing to me.
But I think that's the point, which makes it so much fun, is you are supposed to get so kind of obsessed, and you are supposed to be you're supposed to be Johnny, kind of, and that's what the book does to you. It kind of turns you into that person, right? Writing down the letters or the codes or whatever, trying to get into the deeper meaning of whatever,
and trying to just convince myself that there really was a Will Davidson.
But her letters though, just the feeling that she had for Johnny, as a mother of a son, I'm very close to my son, and I love him more than anybody in the whole world. He's, and I can just imagine being in that situation and that being the only thing you really have to hold on to keep you, So I kind of, had some empathy for her, relate, to being that. But exactly, she might not have actually been crazy. A lot of that happened, especially like that, earlier periods, when they were,
Just a
her wife was just disobedient or whatever.
Hysteria.
When they say she had, it's
Yeah,
hysterical.
she was hysterical. We need to institutionalize her.
But
And we may be getting back to that just any day now.
Sean, what did you think?
Okay, so the one conclusion that helped me process any part of this was I was imagining there was a video that explained that if we just accept that we live in a 3-dimensional world, what would a 4-dimensional object look like to us? Like if it came and entered our world, if it's a simple shape like a pyramid or something, at one point we would see a dot, and then a little bit while it would expand, but we would only see like we would never see the whole of it. We would only see as much as our three-dimensional world could process. And so that's what I was kind of thinking the house was, where like as the hallways grew, it was just like this vast interconnected set of tunnels that was just somehow connected to our world and entering and then leaving and then apparently coming back several years later. So it's possible that Tom and Holloway still exist in another three-dimensional
Or maybe
space.
they came out somewhere else, like remember when the dog and the cat ran down the hallway and they appeared in the yard, maybe they popped out somewhere else.
And that's how Karen and Navy appeared, was in the back of the same place the dog and cat. You know, the neighbors saw them out in the backyard.
Oh, after she,
Yeah.
So she didn't like pull him into the bedroom, I mean.
No, they were in
when
the
wall was on,
backyard.
She didn't pull
They
him
were
into
in the
the house.
backyard.
I definitely felt like this was a Doctor Who episode that the Doctor didn't show up for.
Yeah,
Nobody to explain,
Absolutely.
this is what's on here.
what you're saying though is that's quite the symbolism that just like to life for us now in general. No, I mean, not getting too religious or spiritual or anything, but nobody knows what happens to your consciousness or your soul or whatever you want to call it after we die. We think we know what happens. Some people have hope. Some people think it's just, lights out and that's it. But if there is something, if there is another, what is it? Is it heaven? Is it another dimension? Is it something that is just too big for us to see in this state or in this place and or in this universe? So I think that I find that quite symbolic.
If that's the case, then hopefully post-death, our consciousness is adept enough to be able to process it in a way that in this life we can't.
Well, I would like to broach an idea that has nothing to do with this book. I have really enjoyed this process of the lengthier
Breaking down, I did
book
too.
and spread out over a greater length of time. I mean, Pam and I both do monthly book clubs where you read a book in a month and you go talk about it for an hour and then you go read another book. And that's good. I mean, that's a fun thing. But this was a different kind of experience, and I'd be interested in doing it again. Not with this book.
Yeah, I had thought about that too.
With something else, and I don't.
I thought this was a good group to, I enjoyed discussing with you guys, but I don't know what book might be.
No, I was gonna make a suggestion because, although I haven't read it, but reading a little bit about it and hearing y'all talk, Marcel Proust comes to mind. Remembrance of Things Past, The Search of Lost Time. And I don't know, that came to mind. That's a book you have to, it's like encyclopedic. It's a book you couldn't do in one book reading, you spread it out. I mean, courses are taught on it. You ever heard of William Carter here in Birmingham? He's kind of like William, he used to teach at UAB, he's retired. He's written up about Proust, but he's like a leading contemporary Proust scholar.
Obviously, it would need to be something more complicated than The Wife Upstairs, which
Right,
we
yeah.
just finished last. Right.
I think there are some options, though. The world of literature is getting
Yeah,
more
and maybe
interesting.
you and Stratton could come up with some possibilities, and you should have our email addresses.
Well, you probably don't have mine, because I never actually signed up for this.
Well,
Another book that comes to mind, another reading of our book is Dante, the Divine Comedy, Heaven, Paradise, Inferno.
Yeah.
That would be over the course of time.
Yeah, because one of the videos I saw about this really, what the guy suggested about reading the book, he said, only read a chapter at a time, take some time to think about it. Don't just like jump on to the next chapter, think about, spend a little time thinking about the chapter you just read before you go on, and, don't just, and doing it this way, this was this is a great way to do it, breaking it down.
And we got to share our ideas about a section before we moved down to, I read it the way we discussed. I didn't read ahead. I read the first section and then we met and so forth.
And impressions that you guys, brought up in the, I thought about some of those things as I was reading, forward. So I felt like this was really good.
I had a lot of fun with this.
And like I said, I tried to start reading this book a long time ago. And this is definitely not one you could just, pick up and read a little bit and put it down for a few days and
Take
pick
it
it up
to the
again.
beach.
And another thing, I'm really bad about reading while I'm eating, and you couldn't eat while you're reading this because you're turning pages this way, and
I even got, that was another interesting part, when at the end, when Navy was lost in the tunnel and when he got turned around so that he'd know which direction he was going, and the book was written, and I was heading to I actually got dizzy. At one point, I was so disoriented from turning the book this way and that way and reading, and I thought, whoa, I'm glad I'm sitting down. I think that was a very effective way for him to have written that particular section.
That was probably my favorite part.
Yeah, and the other thing that when I tried to read it the first time, the thing that really that kind of frustrated me, besides that I couldn't just read it in small bits, was the way it was formatted. Like the first couple of chapters are kind of normal, even though it's jumping back, with footnotes. But then when you get to about chapter 9, maybe is the one where it really starts getting, all the weird formatting. And I remember that was probably about as far as I got, and I started getting really frustrated and feeling lost. But I got past that point this time, obviously, and it was.
Well, it's always.
We've talked about this being like a support group.
Well, it is. It's always easier to read something when you got some support,
others are suffering.
Yeah, and you can talk about it and figure things out together. I really enjoyed the whole process, I would like to do it again, and maybe we'll get a bigger group next time. Who knows?
I was most impressed by the fact that I was into this. I thought that I was going to have to just force myself to get through it because this program was my idea, but I actually enjoyed it. There was never a point where I was like, I would rather be doing anything else than reading. I was into it the whole way.
And I've had this book for so long that my son said, I've, for a long time I was noticing this book on your shelf and wondering what it was. And he said, I pulled it off and I started looking. And he said and I didn't remember that he had started reading it once and didn't get very far into it, and he's a big reader, he loves to read.
So he didn't disappear or anything, right?
No, he didn't. Nothing weird happened. I didn't even know he had started reading it. But it was, it was something that I'd always been, had always kind of bothered me that I had just put it aside.
Failed.
All right, we're
Exactly.
doing this.
So, because the other thing, and it's not like, the other thing I can think of as being, that I really had to think about a lot as I was reading it and give it full attention and everything was Faulkner. The Faulkner that I've read.
Yes.
Is
Oh,
hard to,
yeah.
and it's not something that you can pick up and put down, but it's also not something you can read fast, and it's challenging, but not in the same way.
And it might also need a support group.
Yeah, well, I read it all on the partner I've read all on my own. With no
I read a lot of.
Emotional support.
And only because I had to.
But, yeah, so if you guys, if you come across something else,
Yeah.
maybe another person.
An idea.
Definitely pass it along to, and if other
I'll
people
give
are
you my-
interested in.
Well, and I messaged you on Facebook too about the first meeting, so, but
And doesn't
I'll-
Shannon have your information?
she does.
Okay. She knows everybody.
Oh, she does.
If I could just say real quick,
And I
Oh,
do a
sorry.
lot of stuff.
What was it?
I was just going to say real quick, kudos to Sean because this was all him. This was his idea, his baby.
Thank you very much.
Well, it was fun and
It
I
was.
really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we finally got the second session up on Facebook today.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
really?
saw it
Yeah.
just before I left home. I saw that you had posted it, but I hadn't looked at it.
And so I'll go through and I'll edit this and it'll be preserved forever.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts before we shut it down?
Just, it was a book.
Mm.
It was a,
So
it was a book.
I'm glad you could join
It was-
us. I wish that you, been with us the whole way through this house.
I don't know if I could have followed along.
Yes.
I mean, just in general, just because of the time. But anyway, yeah, I'm glad I got some exposure to it. And the two ideas I passed along with, if y'all want to do something, those would be just my suggestions, because I said, as I was listening, y'all said, this makes me think of Marcel Proust. Lost time and remembrance, search of lost things.
Well, and it reminds
Have
me,
you read Proust
it
before?
reminds me of when I tried to read Dante before too, some of the disorientation, that's what I kind of remember about reading that. It's like I believe that word, but the kind of,
Could it be because it's written in the 13th century? Or?
well, it could be. It could
I mean, I don't think that's
be. The whole thing
sarcastic.
about like the levels and
The circles.
the circles, yeah, and there was something about that when I tried to.
Well, Robert Pinsky, who's a recent 3-term, I think, U.S. Poet Laureate, has written a admirable translation of Dante's. I don't know if it's the whole Divine Comedy or just the Inferno, but it's held as considered respected.
And this was great that you had copies. I turned them in.
That one was Madeline. She, I don't know what budget she went into, but she said, I found like 10 copies of this, so it'll be up there for anybody who wants it.
Did y'all have more people at one time? Or did
No,
you-
we
did you
had-
say-
well,
We had 4 of us and one guy that was here the first time on Zoom.
And like he was just reading it independently and he was looking for anywhere that was
He was just
talking
like
about it.
looking online and, Googling
Found
this
us.
book name and he came across this.
And he was from Canada.
He was in
I
Canada.
said, that's good.
He joined,
But see, I never, and that's something that's until this, I never had heard about this book.
Oh, I've never heard of it
And
until.
are they making it to a film? From what I saw,
Yeah.
they're thinking about making it to a film.
They have talked about it several times and nothing has come of it because I think the film, if they were to do a film version, the studios keep wanting to just focus on the Nabbitson story arc, and Danielewski is like, but the Johnny Truman story arc is crucial to the overall plot. And I get it. I don't think it works if you eliminate one of those two.
there's so many books that when they make a movie, it's always disappointing because of the way they have to cut things out, but.
Right. I have a t-shirt that says the book was better.